A Navy SEAL left a family party where he felt like a guest in his own life. The house was warm, the smiles were polite, but nothing inside felt like home. Walking back through the snow with his canine, he passed a dark alley he almost ignored. That was when the dog stopped and refused to move. A woman sat there in the cold, homeless, holding a battered guitar. When she began to sing Blue Christmas, he froze, because she sang it exactly the way his father used to sing before his family was torn apart, and, in that moment, he realized this was not a coincidence. It was the beginning of something he had lost long ago. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story moves you, hit subscribe so you never miss another tale of loyalty, courage, and heart. Your support truly means the world. December settled softly over Portland, Oregon. Snow clung to old streets and bare branches, muting the city into something quieter, heavier, as if winter itself were holding its breath. Rowan Hale stood just inside the doorway of a large, well-kept house glowing with warm yellow light. At 35, he was tall and broad-shouldered, built by years of disciplined training rather than comfort. His dark hair was cut short and precise, flecked faintly with gray at the temples. A trimmed beard framed a sharp, angular jaw, giving him the look of a man older than his years, not from age, but from weight. His eyes were steady, observant, and distant, the kind that missed very little and revealed even less. Beside his left leg, Ash waited. Ash was a retired military K9, a black and tan German shepherd nearing 9 years old. His muzzle had begun to gray, but his posture remained alert, almost formal. He sat close to Rowan's boot, not touching, but near enough to feel his presence. Ash had the calm of a dog who had seen chaos and survived it, and the quiet loyalty of one who never forgot who he belonged to. Rowan had been invited, politely, thoughtfully, to a family gathering hosted by his adoptive parents. The house was spacious, immaculate, and decorated for Christmas with careful restraint. Evergreen garlands lined the staircase. A tree stood near the window, its ornaments tasteful and evenly spaced. Everything was warm. Everything was correct. And yet, from the moment Rowan stepped inside, he felt like a visitor. His adoptive father, Thomas Hale, greeted him with a firm handshake and a nod that carried approval but little softness. Thomas was a solid man in his early 60s, with squared features and silver-streaked hair combed neatly back. Years spent as an engineer at a coastal military shipyard had shaped him. Precise, practical, orderly. He had never worn a uniform, never been to war, but discipline lived in his posture and his voice. Rowan's adoptive mother, Eleanor, offered a gentle smile. She was a slender woman with fair skin and light brown hair pulled into a tidy bun, the look of someone who had spent decades in classrooms. A high school teacher by profession, she spoke carefully, listened politely, and kept emotional distance as naturally as breathing. They had taken Rowan in when he was 9. They had given him safety, structure, a future. They had not given him warmth. During dinner, conversation moved easily around the table. Holiday plans, work updates, distant relatives, travel ideas. Rowan answered when spoken to, his tone respectful and measured. He sat straight-backed, hands folded neatly when not eating, as though he were still under observation. Ash lay quietly beneath the table, his head resting lightly against Rowan's boot, breathing slow and steady. No one was unkind. No one was intrusive, and no one truly saw him. As the voices continued around him, Rowan's mind drifted somewhere far less polished. He saw a small wooden house, drafty and worn, a narrow table with chipped edges, a man with rough hands who came home exhausted from construction work and smelled of dust and metal, a woman barely past her youth, her face lined not by age but by worry, holding 2 children close as winter pressed in from every direction. He remembered the morning his father didn't come home. He remembered the silence that followed. And he remembered the day his mother made a choice no one should ever have to make, sending her eldest child away, not because she didn't love him, but because loving him meant letting him go. A gray morning, a closing door. Rowan had not looked back when he stepped forward, But something inside him had stayed behind, lodged in that narrow hallway forever. That was the boy who still lived inside the man. Rowan had not chosen the Navy SEALs for glory or honor. He chose them because they offered clarity. In cold water and endless nights, pain had rules. Endurance had purpose. No one asked where he came from. They only asked if he could hold on. He could, he had. But survival did not erase the past. It only buried it deeper. As dessert was served and laughter softened into something almost comfortable, Rowan felt the familiar pressure in his chest, the quiet urge to leave before the emptiness became visible. He excused himself early. No one argued. Outside, the cold welcomed him honestly. Ash rose immediately, stepping into place at Rowan's side as they walked away from the house and into the falling snow. Their footsteps were swallowed quickly by the white street. A few blocks later, Rowan stopped at a small, aging American bakery still open despite the hour. Warm light spilled onto the sidewalk. Inside, he ordered a single slice of apple pie, not because he was hungry, because something about it felt familiar. He held the warm plate in his hands, the scent stirring something he could not name. He did not remember the memory itself, only the feeling of holding something warm in a colder time, in a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. Ash lifted his head, watching him quietly. Rowan met the dog's gaze and understood without words that some memories did not need names to exist. Some simply waited. Clara Hale lived in a world without exits. At 29, she had learned how to measure time not by years, but by rent cycles, prescription refills, and the quiet question that followed her everywhere. What happens if I'm not here tomorrow? She did not remember the day her brother was taken away. At 3 years old, memory had not yet learned how to keep faces. What remained instead was an image burned too deeply to fade. A narrow doorway, a winter coat hanging unused, and her mother standing very still long after the door had closed, as if time itself might change its mind. Their life after that did not collapse. It thinned. They moved often. Small apartments, cheaper each time. Clara learned early how to recognize the sound of a landlord's footsteps, how to read a grocery receipt like a map of survival, how to tell whether her mother's tiredness was physical or something darker settling behind her eyes. Evelyn Hale did not fall apart. She endured. And Clara, watching, learned endurance too. The name Rowan was never spoken loudly in that house. It existed like dust in the corners, always present, never addressed. There were no photographs, no letters, no address written down. Only a pause whenever the past came too close, and a silence that grew heavier as Clara got older. She knew she had an older brother the way one knows a story told too many times without details, real, important, and unreachable. 7 years ago, the world shifted again. It happened quietly, the way serious things often do. Evelyn began forgetting small tasks, where she left her keys, whether she had eaten. Then came the nights when she sat at the edge of the bed, staring at nothing, whispering a name Clara had not heard spoken in years. Rowan. The syllables came with clarity, even as the present slipped away. Depression settled in slowly, without warning signs dramatic enough to stop it. Memory loss followed, selective and cruel. The past sharpened while the present dissolved. Clara became many things at once. Daughter, caregiver, keeper of routines, guardian of fragile calm. Some nights her mother looked at her as if she were a stranger standing in the wrong place. Other nights Evelyn reached for her hand and called her by the wrong name, voice trembling with longing for someone who no longer had a face. Clara learned not to correct her. She learned that truth could sometimes do more harm than comfort. She never searched for her brother. Not because she didn't want to, because she didn't dare. If she reached out and found nothing, something inside her mother might finally give way. And if Clara left to search, even briefly, there would be no one there when Evelyn woke up afraid, when the medication ran out, when winter pressed its weight against the walls. Hope, Clara had learned, was a dangerous thing when you were the only one holding everything together. Money was a constant calculation. Jobs came and went, cafes, cleaning work, short-term shifts that ended without ceremony. None of them lasted long enough to build security. Each month began with the same arithmetic. Rent first, medicine second, food last. There was never enough, only just enough to keep going. Music was the one thing Clara had not let go of. Her guitar was old, the wood worn smooth where her fingers rested. She carried it everywhere, not for dreams of fame, but because it was one of the few things that still responded when she touched it. She played on sidewalks and in alleys where sound echoed longer than attention. She did not perform loudly. She sang softly for whoever happened to be listening or not listening. The coins mattered. The music mattered more. That night, the cold was sharper than usual. Clara sat hunched in the narrow alley near her apartment, shoulders drawn inward to conserve warmth. Her coat was too thin, its seams fraying at the cuffs. Her hair, a muted chestnut brown, fell loose around her face, catching snowflakes that melted almost immediately against her skin. She was small, slight in build, with pale hands reddened by cold and string pressure. Her face held the look of someone older than her years, not hardened but careful, as if the world required constant negotiation. She sang because silence felt heavier than sound. "I'll have a blue Christmas." Her voice wavered, but did not break. She closed her eyes, letting the song carry her somewhere safer, somewhere warmer, somewhere where her mother still remembered her name without effort. She did not notice the man at first. People passed her all the time without seeing her. Some glanced away quickly. Others looked too long, curiosity edged with judgment. She had learned to exist in the space between attention and invisibility. So, when she opened her eyes after the second verse and saw a tall man standing at the edge of the alley, she stiffened. He was broad-shouldered, dressed simply, his posture unmistakably controlled. His beard was neatly trimmed, his face angular, eyes sharp and unreadable. Beside him stood a German shepherd, older, calm, watching her with focused intelligence. Not a stray, not a pet. Something else. Her grip tightened around the guitar neck. The man did not speak. He did not reach into his pocket. He simply stood there, as if unsure whether stepping forward would change something he wasn't ready to touch. The dog remained still, alert but not aggressive. Clara's first instinct was caution. Men stopped for many reasons. Few of them were good. She lowered her gaze, fingers brushing the strings as if to shield herself. Whatever this moment was, she did not have the energy to define it. She had already given everything she had for the day. Tomorrow would demand the same. Inside her chest, though, something shifted, unease mixed with a strange familiarity she could not place. She told herself it meant nothing. Cold did strange things to the mind. So did exhaustion. She finished the song quietly and waited. The alley held its breath. The alley was narrow enough that sound lingered longer than footsteps. Rowan Hale had already taken 2 steps past it when Ash stopped. Not abruptly, not with alarm, but with a low sound in his chest, half breath, half warning, and a steady pull on the leash. Ash's body angled slightly toward the darkness, ears forward, tail still. The posture of a dog who had learned the difference between danger and significance. Rowan reacted without thinking. Years of training tightened his spine and sharpened his awareness. He turned back immediately, eyes scanning corners, hands relaxed but ready. The alley smelled of damp brick and old trash, snow melting into thin streams along the cracked pavement. That was when he saw her. She sat against the wall near a rusted fire escape, shoulders hunched inward as if trying to fold herself smaller. She was young, maybe late 20s, slight in build, with narrow shoulders and long legs drawn close to her chest. Her coat was worn thin at the elbows, the fabric dulled by too many winters. Strands of chestnut-brown hair escaped from beneath a knit cap, clinging to her pale cheeks where the cold had left them faintly flushed. She held a guitar. It was an old acoustic, the wood scratched and dulled, the varnish long gone where hands had rested year after year. One corner was chipped, the strap repaired with mismatched thread. She cradled it, not like an instrument, but like something fragile. One arm curved protectively around the body, the other hand resting over the strings, shielding them from the cold. That was what stopped Rowan. Not her face, not her poverty, but the way she held the guitar, as if it might feel the wind, as if it needed protecting. His chest tightened before his mind could explain why. Ash remained still, eyes fixed on her with quiet intensity. Not aggressive, not curious, recognizing. The woman shifted slightly, sensing their presence. Her fingers brushed the strings, tentative at first, then firmer, as if reminding herself that sound still existed. She adjusted the guitar against her ribs, drew a breath, and began to play. Slowly, almost without rhythm. Then she sang, "I'll have a blue Christmas without you." Her voice was thin from the cold, but steady, not trained, not polished, honest. It carried the softness of someone singing for herself rather than an audience. Snowflakes drifted into the alley, melting in her hair, catching briefly on the guitar's worn surface. She paused, drew in a breath that shook slightly. "I'll be so blue, just thinking about you." And then she stopped. She did not look up, did not extend the guitar case, did not wait for coins or applause. Her gaze dropped to the strings, as if afraid that meeting someone's eyes might break whatever fragile space the song had created. Rowan stood frozen. Not because of the song itself, but because of how it had been sung. The phrasing, the slight delay before the second line, the way her voice dipped on blue and rose again on thinking. He had heard that exact cadence before, long ago, in a kitchen that smelled of cheap coffee and sawdust. From a man with rough hands and a tired smile who sang not because he was good at it, but because it was December and silence felt heavier than music. Rowan's throat tightened. For a moment he forgot where he was, forgot the cold, the alley, the years in between. The memory hit him not as an image but as a sensation, a weight in his chest, familiar and unwelcome. Ash shifted slightly, pressing closer to Rowan's leg. The woman finally looked up. Her eyes were a muted green, dulled by exhaustion rather than age. They flicked first to Ash, then to Rowan, wary but not afraid. She had learned caution the way some people learned manners, early and without instruction. Rowan realized he had been staring. He softened his posture deliberately, stepping back half a pace, letting his shoulders drop. His voice, when it came, was low, careful, as if speaking too loudly might shatter something invisible. "Why do you know that song?" The question hung between them, simple and dangerous. She hesitated. Her fingers tightened briefly around the guitar neck. For a second, Rowan thought she might not answer. People on the street were used to being questioned for the wrong reasons. Then she spoke. "My dad used to sing it," she said. Her voice was quiet, almost defensive, as if she expected disbelief. "Every Christmas, back when we still had a farm." The word farm landed like a dropped plate. Rowan felt it before he understood it, a sharp internal shift, like a door unlocking somewhere deep inside him. He did not ask what kind of farm, did not ask where. He already knew the smell of that place, the sound of wind across open land, the way December felt when work never really stopped. He swallowed. "How long ago?" he asked. She shrugged, a small practiced motion. "Long time?" Ash let out a soft sound, barely audible, not a whine, more like recognition settling into place. Rowan noticed then how she watched Ash, not with fear, but with curiosity edged by something else. Trust, maybe. Or the simple relief of seeing a creature that looked at her without judgment. "I'm Rowan," he said finally, offering his name without explanation. She studied him for a beat, eyes moving over his face, the controlled beard, the lines around his eyes, the posture that spoke of discipline rather than threat. "Clara," she replied. "Clara Hale." The name struck him like a physical blow. Hale. Rowan's pulse surged in his ears. He kept his face neutral through sheer force of will, but something inside him splintered. Ash's ears flicked sharply at the sound of her name, his body tensing in sudden alertness. Rowan knew, in that instant, that the night had shifted irrevocably. He did not say anything more, not yet. The truth was too large, too unstable to be spoken aloud in a dark alley with snow falling between them. He sensed that if he reached for it too quickly, it might vanish. Clara glanced down at her guitar again, uncertainty creeping back into her expression. She began, then stopped, unsure of what excuse to give. Rowan nodded once. "I won't keep you," he said, and then, softer, "But you sing like someone I used to know." Her lips pressed together. "People say that sometimes." "Not like this," Rowan replied. The alley fell quiet again, snow settling into the cracks. Rowan did not yet understand what he had found, but he knew, with the same certainty that had guided him through storms and fire, that this was not coincidence. This was the moment before everything changed. Rowan did not plan to say it. The words surfaced the way instincts did in him, sudden, unfiltered, carried on a certainty he had learned to trust in worse moments than this. He looked at Clara, really looked at her now, at the familiar line of her jaw, the way her shoulders squared when she felt cornered, the stubborn steadiness behind her caution. "I think I'm your brother," he said. The alley seemed to recoil. Clara stared at him for a long second, then let out a short, breathless laugh that held no humor. She shook her head slowly, as if calming a frightened animal. "No," she said, "you're not the first man to try that." Her voice stayed level, but her fingers tightened around the guitar neck until her knuckles whitened. "People say things when they want something. Money, sympathy, a place to stay." Rowan didn't interrupt. He recognized that tone. Defensive, practiced, learned the hard way. She met his eyes again, searching for cracks. "I don't blame you for trying," she added, softer now. "But it's not going to work." Her hands trembled despite herself. She pressed her lips together, blinking hard. Rowan saw the conflict play across her face, the reflex to protect herself, and beneath it, something more dangerous. Hope. Thin as ice, easy to break. "I'm not asking you to believe me," Rowan said quietly. "Not yet." Before she could respond, footsteps echoed from the far end of the alley. 3 men emerged from the shadows, their laughter sharp and careless. They moved with the loose confidence of people who had learned the neighborhood's blind spots. The tallest of them was broad and heavy-set, wearing a hooded jacket stretched tight across his shoulders. His beard was patchy, unkempt, his eyes dull with entitlement. The second was thinner, restless, pacing ahead with twitchy energy. The third hung back, younger, watching more than speaking. Rowan shifted without thinking, placing himself half a step in front of Clara. Ash rose smoothly to his feet, body low, muscles coiled. The heavy-set man glanced at Rowan, then at Clara, his smile fading into irritation. "This spot's taken tonight," he said. "Move along." Clara's shoulders tensed. "I was here first," she said, but her voice lacked force. She had said these words before. She knew how they usually ended. Rowan did not speak. The thin man laughed and nudged the other. "Looks like she brought backup," he said. His gaze flicked to Ash, lingering a second too long. "Nice dog." Ash did not growl. He simply stared back, eyes fixed, posture unmistakable. The look of an animal trained not to bluff. The heavy-set man took a step closer. That was the mistake. Rowan moved. The motion was precise, economical. He caught the man's wrist as it reached forward, twisted, stepped inside the space before resistance could form. The man grunted, momentum stolen, and went down hard against the brick wall. The thin one lunged without thinking. Rowan pivoted, drove a shoulder into his chest, sent him sprawling onto the icy ground. Ash surged forward in a blur of controlled power, placing himself squarely between Clara and the third man. Teeth bared, stance solid. He did not advance. He didn't need to. The third man froze. It was over in less than a minute. No blood. No shouting. Just bodies scrambling back, curses muttered through clenched teeth, the sound of retreating footsteps swallowed by falling snow. Rowan exhaled slowly, adrenaline fading. Clara stood frozen, her guitar clutched tight against her ribs. She stared at Rowan as if seeing him for the first time, not as a stranger, not as a liar, but as something else entirely. Someone who had not taken advantage. Someone who had stepped in without asking for permission or reward. Ash returned to Rowan's side, calm again, tail low but steady. "You didn't have to do that," Clara said, her voice unsteady. "Yes," Rowan replied. "I did." Silence settled between them, heavier now, layered with what had just happened. After a moment, Rowan spoke again. "They'll be back," he said, not as a threat, as a fact. "Not tonight, but soon." Clara knew he was right. She glanced down the alley, then toward the street beyond. Her jaw tightened as she weighed options she had already exhausted. "Come with me," Rowan said, "at least for the night." She hesitated. "I'm not asking you to trust me," he repeated. "Just to stay safe." Her gaze dropped to Ash. The dog looked back at her with quiet attention, head slightly tilted, as if waiting for her answer. There was no hunger in his eyes, no demand, only patience. Clara swallowed. "My mom," she said. "She's not well. I can't leave her alone too long." Rowan nodded once. "Then let me walk you home." The walk was quiet. Snow softened the city, muffling traffic, turning streetlights into blurred halos. Clara led the way, glancing back occasionally as if expecting him to vanish. Rowan followed at a respectful distance, Ash pacing between them, a steady presence. They stopped in front of a narrow, aging duplex with peeling paint and a flickering porch light. The building leaned slightly, like something tired, but stubborn. Clara unlocked the door, hesitating one last time before stepping inside. She turned back to Rowan, eyes searching his face. "If you're lying," she said, not accusing, just afraid, "this would hurt more than anything else." Rowan met her gaze. "I know." She nodded once and opened the door wider. Rowan followed her inside, into the warmth and the truth waiting beyond it, knowing that whatever happened next, there was no turning back. The house was old in the way things became old when they were never allowed to rest. Its paint had faded unevenly, peeled back in places by years of rain and cold. The roof sagged just enough to betray its age, patched more than once with mismatched shingles. Inside, the furniture was worn but clean, repaired rather than replaced. Every object seemed to carry the quiet discipline of survival, as if order itself were a form of warmth. Rowan stepped inside slowly. The air smelled faintly of boiled vegetables, old wood, and winter coats drying too close to a heater. Ash followed without command, padding across the floor with careful steps, sensing the shift in tone the way he always did when something fragile waited ahead. Evelyn Hale sat alone near the small table by the window. She was thinner than Rowan remembered from photographs buried in old records. Her shoulders curved inward, not from weakness but from habit. Her hair, once dark, had faded to a soft gray, pulled back loosely with a clip that no longer held properly. Pale strands framed her face, catching the dim light. Her skin was lined, not harshly but gently, as if time had passed over her without cruelty, only persistence. Her eyes lifted when Rowan entered. They did not recognize him. Not truly. She looked at him the way one looks at a stranger carrying something heavy, curious, uncertain, aware that whatever stood before her mattered, even if she could not place it. Her gaze moved slowly from his face to his posture, then to Ash, who sat down quietly near the door, alert but respectful. Clara lingered just behind Rowan, her breath shallow. She had seen this moment end badly before. Names spoken too quickly. Truths delivered like blows. She stayed silent. Rowan lowered himself to one knee. He did not say, "Mom." He did not say, "It's me." He knew better. Words like that could fracture a mind already fighting to hold itself together. He had learned, through war and loss, that timing was everything. Instead, he spoke softly, carefully, as though approaching a locked door that might open only if touched the right way. "You still use the chipped mug," he said. "The one with the crack near the handle." Evelyn's brow furrowed. Rowan continued, his voice steady but low. You always said it kept the heat better, said it reminded you not to rush. Her fingers twitched against her lap. There was a chair by the wall, he went on. Wooden. The leg wobbled, but Dad wouldn't let anyone fix it, said it taught patience. Evelyn's breathing changed, slightly faster now. Her eyes did not leave his face. Rowan swallowed the words heavier now. And apple pie, he said. You always cut it uneven, gave the bigger piece away, even when there wasn't much left. The room seemed to hold its breath. Evelyn stared at him for a long moment, something shifting behind her eyes, memory pressing upward through fog. Her lips parted, closed again. She shook her head faintly, as if resisting the pull. Then she whispered, her voice fragile but certain, You always liked apple pie. She paused, searching the air for the rest. Even when we had almost nothing. Clara's hands clenched at her sides. She covered her mouth, tears burning but contained. She had waited years for her mother to say something like that without confusion. Rowan bowed his head. He did not cry. Not yet. He reached forward slowly, letting Evelyn see the movement, letting her decide. When she did not pull away, he placed his hand gently over hers. Her fingers were cold, thin, but they tightened around his just a little. Recognition did not arrive like lightning. It came like dawn. Evelyn leaned forward, pressing her forehead lightly against his shoulder. Her body trembled, not with fear, but with release. She did not ask who he was. She did not need to. Something older than memory had answered for her. Clara stepped closer, kneeling beside them. She wrapped her arms around both of them, holding on as if afraid the moment might slip away if she loosened her grip. No one spoke. Ash lowered himself to the floor near their feet, resting his head on his paws. His breathing slowed, deep and even, the posture of a sentry who knew his watch mattered. Outside, the wind pressed against the house, finding its way through cracks and seams. Inside, something long broken settled into place. Time passed without anyone measuring it. Eventually, Evelyn pulled back slightly. She looked at Rowan again, not confused now, but tired. You're home, she said simply. Rowan nodded. Yes, he replied. I am. She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that cost effort but came from somewhere true. Her hand remained in his, as if anchoring herself. Clara exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. Nothing was fixed. Nothing was healed. But something had been found, and for the first time since that gray morning long ago, the door that had closed did not feel final. Rowan stayed, not with speeches or promises, but with his hands. The first mornings began before dawn, when the house still creaked under the cold. He worked quietly, moving room to room, sealing narrow gaps where winter slipped in. He replaced brittle window gaskets, squared a door that no longer closed cleanly, and climbed the ladder to patch the roof with sheets cut to fit, secured tight enough to outlast the season. The house did not change its shape. It simply stopped shivering. Ash followed him everywhere, 9 years old now, the gray at his muzzle more visible in daylight. The dog moved with the confidence of habit, lying near the ladder when Rowan climbed, rising when tools were set down, alert to sounds that didn't belong. In the evenings, Ash settled near the heater, eyes half-lidded, the quiet guardian of a space that was becoming safe again. Rowan learned the rhythms of care the way he learned terrain, by paying attention. Each week, he walked with Evelyn to the community clinic 3 blocks away. The building was low and utilitarian, its paint dull but clean. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and coffee. The nurse who checked them in, Marta, was a compact woman in her 40s with close-cropped hair and kind eyes sharpened by years of triage. She spoke gently, directly, never pretending things were simpler than they were. The appointments were incremental, conversations first, memory screens. A low-dose prescription adjusted slowly, monitored carefully. Some days Evelyn answered questions easily, her posture relaxed, her smile quick to appear. Other days she folded inward, startled by her own reflection, frightened by words she could not hold. Rowan waded through both. He read pamphlets until the pages softened at the edges, asked questions, wrote times and doses in a small notebook he carried everywhere. At home, evenings were kept deliberately plain. Rowan told stories that stayed anchored in the present, the sound of rain on metal, the smell of fresh bread from a corner shop, the names of streets they passed that day. When Evelyn grew tired, he stopped. When she laughed, he remembered it. Clara's guitar moved from the alley to the living room. Rowan dragged an old chair into place, stacked books beneath a phone to raise the lens, and asked her to play the way she always had. No polish, no rush. Clara sat with her shoulders slightly hunched, hair pulled back with a worn elastic, fingers warming against the strings before she began. Her voice trembled the first take, steadied on the second. Rowan listened without interrupting, nodding only once when she finished. He sent one recording to a friend he trusted from years earlier, Evan Brooks, a former logistics specialist who now volunteered with a neighborhood arts group. Evan was tall and narrow, beard neatly trimmed, the kind of man whose calm came from having learned patience the hard way. He replied a day later with a short message. Have her come by. No promises. The cafe was small and warm, its windows fogged by breath and steam. Clara sang one song. Her hands shook. She kept her eyes on the guitar. No applause followed, just a nod from the owner and a time scribbled on a napkin. The second night paid enough for groceries. The third brought a slot at a winter fundraiser in a church basement, folding chairs and paper cups, music rising gently above the hum of conversation. Clara still worked mornings when she could, sorting stock, wiping counters, but the guitar stopped being a gamble and started becoming a schedule, not a miracle, a path. When the coldest nights passed and the heater hummed more reliably, Rowan returned to the house where he had grown up. The meeting with his adoptive parents was measured, heavy with things left unsaid. His father listened with his hands folded, jaw set, disappointment framed as concern. His mother spoke softly, the words careful, the distance intact. They said he was choosing uncertainty over stability. Rowan thanked them. He did not argue. He did not plead. He explained that he had found what he was missing and that staying was not a rejection, but a decision. When he left, the door closed without ceremony. He felt the familiar ache and recognized it for what it was, a chapter ending, not a failure. Back home, the house held its quiet. Evelyn slept through the night more often. Clara practiced with intention. Ash lay by the door, content. Rowan sat at the table and wrote a list for the week ahead. Appointments, shifts, songs to rehearse, small tasks arranged like stepping stones. Nothing was fixed, but everything was moving. And, for the first time in years, staying felt like progress. Snow fell steadily on Christmas Eve, light and patient, settling over the quiet street as if the city itself had chosen to speak more softly. The small house glowed from within, its windows casting warm rectangles onto the white ground outside. For the first time in years, the cold felt held at bay rather than endured. Inside, the heater hummed and the fireplace crackled gently. Clara moved carefully between the kitchen and the table, carrying a homemade apple pie cradled in both hands. It leaned slightly to one side, the crust uneven, a corner browned more than intended, but the smell filled the room with something unmistakably comforting. She set it down and exhaled, brushing flour from her fingers. Her shoulders were still tense, but there was a steadiness to her movements now, a growing confidence shaped by weeks of small victories. Evelyn sat near the light, wrapped in a thick knitted shawl Clara had found at a thrift store weeks earlier. The fabric rested neatly on her shoulders, framing her thinner frame. Her hair, softly gray, had been brushed back that evening, and though her eyes still wandered at times, confusion came less often. When she smiled now, it lingered. She watched Clara with a quiet fondness, as if anchoring herself to the moment. Ash lay beneath the table, stretched out with his head resting on his paws. The old German shepherd breathed slowly, content, the weight of the room settled into his bones. He lifted his head once, ears flicking, when the doorbell rang. The sound cut cleanly through the room. Rowan rose at once. He paused only briefly, a flicker of recognition crossing his face, then crossed the room and opened the door. His adoptive parents stood on the porch. They looked different without the polish of formal dinners and careful distance. Thomas Hale's shoulders seemed heavier beneath his thick winter coat, his lined face drawn tight with something like restraint. Eleanor stood beside him, hands clasped together, her scarf pulled high around her neck. The wind had reddened her cheeks. Neither of them smiled at first. "We weren't sure you'd want to see us," Eleanor said quietly. Rowan stepped aside without answering. They entered the house slowly, as if unsure of the rules. Their eyes took in the small space, the patched walls, the modest furniture. There was no judgment in their expressions, only uncertainty and something close to humility. Thomas cleared his throat. "We were wrong," he said. The words came out stiffly, unpracticed. "We thought leaving meant turning your back on us. We didn't understand that you were going back to something unfinished." Rowan listened. He did not interrupt. Eleanor's gaze softened as it moved from Clara to Evelyn. "We don't understand everything," she said, "but we see now that you didn't abandon anyone. You found them." Rowan nodded once. That was enough. They sat around the table together, an arrangement no one commented on. Clara cut the apple pie into careful slices, making sure each piece was as even as she could manage. Plates were passed. Forks touched porcelain. No one rushed. The pie was warm, sweet without being rich, the kind of dessert made to be shared rather than admired. Evelyn took a bite and smiled faintly. "It's good," she said, as if surprised. Clara smiled back, her eyes bright. Ash shifted under the table, settling more comfortably, his presence steady and grounding. After dinner, the room fell into a gentle quiet. Outside, snow continued to fall, erasing the street in layers. Clara stood and reached for her guitar almost without thinking. She checked the tuning softly, each adjustment small and deliberate. She wasn't performing. She was simply beginning. "I'll have a blue Christmas without you." Her voice was low, controlled, warmer than it had been weeks earlier. The song filled the room without effort, slipping into corners and settling there. She paused, drew in a breath. Rowan turned from the window and stepped closer. He did not speak. He simply stood beside her. "I'll be so blue. Just thinking about you." This time, Rowan joined her. His voice was quiet, unadorned, carrying the weight of memory rather than technique. It wasn't perfect, neither was hers. But, together, the notes aligned naturally, as if they had always known where the other would land. Brother and sister, finding rhythm not through rehearsal, but through shared absence. Evelyn closed her eyes. Her fingers tapped lightly against her shawl, following the melody. A tear slipped free, unnoticed. She did not try to explain it. She didn't need to. When the song ended, silence held the room. No one clapped. No one rushed to speak. The moment didn't ask for acknowledgement. It asked only to be felt. Outside, the snow softened every edge. Inside, something settled at last. Rowan looked around the room. At Clara, standing taller now, at Evelyn, resting peacefully, at the two people who had raised him, finally seeing him, at Ash, guarding the quiet with patient devotion. For years, he had believed home was something lost. Tonight, he understood it differently. Home was not a place you returned to unchanged. It was a place that forgave you for being gone. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with thunder or light from the sky. Sometimes they arrive quietly, through a song remembered, a door reopened, a family finding its way back to one another. Perhaps God does not always remove the storm. Perhaps He teaches us how to walk through it, step by step, until we realize we were never truly alone. In our daily lives, we pass by many alleys, many people carrying silent pain. Many moments where love is waiting, just beyond fear. If this story touched your heart, let it remind you that what feels lost may simply be waiting to be found, in God's perfect time. Please share this story with someone who might need hope tonight. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. We read every one. And if you believe in stories of healing, faith, and second chances, consider subscribing to the channel. May God bless you and your family. May His peace fill your home